The night sky is a storybook written in light. For thousands of years, every human who has ever lived has looked up at those same stars and felt a profound, humbling connection. That shared gaze across millennia is the beginning of our journey. We are about to travel across the globe and through time to uncover the stories of 35 ancient civilizations who worshipped the sky. From the sun-drenched temples of the Inca to the star paths of the Polynesians, from the cosmic calendars of the Maya to the thunder gods of the Slavic steppes, we will see how the heavens shaped gods, dictated empires, and guided human destiny. By the end, you will possess a sweeping view of humanity's oldest and most universal faith, a celestial tapestry woven with threads of astronomy, mythology, and sheer wonder. We will discover why a pharaoh's soul became a star, how a lost civilization predicted the motion of a star they could not see, and what secret message is written in the dark spaces between the stars. What is the first civilization that comes to your mind when you think of the sky above? Perhaps no civilization wove the sky into the fabric of life more completely than ancient Egypt. Their entire world was a reflection of the cosmos above. They did not simply see a dark expanse dotted with lights. They saw the body of the goddess Nut, her star-studded form arched protectively over the earth, her fingertips and toes touching the horizons. Each night she swallowed the sun god Ra, and each morning she gave birth to him again, a cycle of death and rebirth mirrored in the Nile's own life-giving floods. This was not a distant metaphor, it was their daily reality. The annual rising of the star Sirius, which they called Soptit, was their most critical calendar event. When Soptit appeared just before dawn, it heralded the imminent flooding of the Nile, the event that would deposit rich, black silt across their fields and guarantee another year of survival. The sky was their clock, their calendar, and their guarantee of life itself. This celestial belief system was the very architecture of power. Pharaohs were not just kings. They were the living embodiment of Horus, the sky god, the son of Ra. Upon death, they did not merely pass away. Their souls undertook a perilous journey to join Ra in his solar bark, sailing the celestial river of the Milky Way. Their ultimate destination was to become an imperishable star, fixed forever in the northern sky among the circumpolar constellations that never set. This is why the pyramids were built with such impossible precision. The sides were aligned to the cardinal points with astonishing accuracy, anchoring the pharaoh's tomb to the fundamental order of the cosmos. The narrow shafts within the Great Pyramid, for example, were not air vents. They were star shafts precisely angled to point directly at important stars like Sirius and the northern pole stars, creating a direct conduit for the pharaoh's soul to ascend to its celestial home. In Egypt, sky worship was state policy, engineering, and the promise of eternal life, all under the watchful eyes of Nut. But if Egypt saw the sky as a divine body, the civilizations of Mesopotamia saw it as a divine text. In the fertile land between the Tigris and Euphrates rivers, the Sumerians, Akkadians, and Babylonians became humanity's first systematic astronomers. They were not just worshippers of the sky, they were its scribes, meticulously recording every flicker and movement, convinced the gods were writing messages in the language of the stars. Their entire pantheon was celestial. At the very top sat Anu, the god of the heavens, the father of the gods, and the ultimate source of authority. Then there was Ishtar, the dazzling goddess of love and war, whose physical form was the planet Venus, the brightest object in the sky after the sun and moon. Her movements were watched with intense fascination, as her appearances and disappearances were believed to signal shifts in fortune, romance, and conflict. This belief that celestial events directly influenced earthly affairs led to the birth of a formal practice, astrology. The Mesopotamians did something revolutionary. They divided the band of sky through which the sun, moon, and planets traveled into 12 equal sections, each named after a prominent constellation that resided there. This was the creation of the zodiac, a concept so powerful it would echo for thousands of years. But for them, this was not about personal horoscopes. This was state security. Teams of priest astronomers would spend each night on the rooftops of their ziggurat temples, clay tablets in hand, recording everything. A lunar eclipse was not a fascinating shadow play. It was a direct omen, often predicting the death of a king. The appearance of a comet was a terrifying portent of invasion or plague. The precise timing of a planet entering a zodiacal constellation could dictate whether an army should march, a treaty should be signed, or a new temple should be founded. These celestial omens were compiled into enormous reference works like the Enuma Anu Enlil, which kings and advisors consulted as we might consult an economic forecast or an intelligence report. In Mesopotamia, the sky was not just a realm of gods, it was the ultimate bulletin board, and learning to read it was the most critical science in the world. While the Mesopotamians were decoding omens, another civilization, deep in the jungles of Mesoamerica, was building a different kind of celestial empire, one of pure, breathtaking time. The Maya were not just sky watchers, they were masters of cosmic rhythm, architects of time itself. Their entire civilization was an intricate machine designed to track, record, and harmonize with the cycles of the heavens. At the heart of this system was the sun, personified as the fierce and sometimes terrifying god Kinish-Ahau. He was not a gentle life-giver. He was a lord who demanded blood and sacrifice to ensure his daily journey across the sky, a journey that sustained the world but could also scorch it with drought. His counterpart was the moon goddess Ixchel, a complex deity of childbirth, weaving, medicine, and water. Her gentle light governed the feminine cycles of life, and her waxing and waning phases were meticulously charted, tied to fertility rituals and the fortunes of kings. But the Maya reserved their most intense astronomical focus for a different celestial body altogether, the planet Venus. To them, Venus was not a planet of love. It was a god of war known as Kukulkan, or the Great Star. Its appearance as the morning star rising before the sun was seen as a baleful, dangerous omen. Maya codices, their sacred bark paper books, contain detailed tables predicting the precise movements of Venus across decades. Why such obsession? Because the cycles of Venus were believed to directly influence the outcomes of war. A king would time his military campaigns, his raids, and his ritual battles to coincide with specific phases of Venus, believing the war god in the sky would grant him victory. This celestial timing was not superstition. It was a sophisticated science of divine alignment, and this brings us to their true genius, their calendars. The Maya did not have one calendar. They operated several simultaneously, like interlocking gears in a cosmic clock. The 260-day sacred round, the 365-day solar year, and the vast, mind-bending long count, which measured time in cycles of thousands of years. These calendars were not for scheduling harvests or festivals alone. They were a language for speaking to the gods. Each day was not a date. It was a living entity with its own spirit and destiny, determined by its position across all the cycling calendars. The completion of a major cycle, like the famous end of a Bacton that sparked so much modern speculation about the year 2012, was a moment of profound cosmic renewal, a time when the fabric of reality needed to be strengthened through ceremony and sacrifice to ensure the next cycle would begin. For the Maya, time was a sacred, animate force woven from the movements of the sky, and to calculate it with such precision was the highest form of prayer. Across the ocean and high in the Andes Mountains, another empire declared itself a direct descendant of the sun. For the Inca, the sky was not a distant realm of omens or a complex clock. It was the source of their royal bloodline and the very glue that held their vast mountainous empire together. At the center of their universe was Inti, the all-powerful sun god. He was not merely a deity they worshipped, He was their divine ancestor. The Sopa Inca, the emperor himself, was believed to be the living son of Inti, a direct incarnation of the sun's power on earth. This divine connection was the ultimate source of the emperor's absolute authority. His right to rule came not from political maneuvering, but from a celestial mandate written in daylight itself. To house this divine presence, they built the Coricancha, the Temple of the Sun, in the heart of their capital, Cusco. This was not just a building, it was a statement in stone and gold. Its walls were lined with sheets of solid gold that reflected the sun's rays, flooding the interior chambers with a blinding, divine light. In the main temple, a massive golden disc representing Inti was positioned to catch the first rays of the dawn, a daily miracle of illumination that validated the emperor's rule. But the Incan relationship with the sun was intensely practical as well as spiritual. Their empire spanned some of the most rugged terrain on Earth, and survival depended on perfect timing for planting and harvest in the thin mountain air. To achieve this, they engineered the sky itself into a precision instrument. On the horizons around Cusco and other important centers, they constructed stone pillars called sucancas. At certain times of the year, particularly the June and December solstices, a priest astronomer would watch from a specific, fixed point in a temple as the sun rose or set directly between two of these distant pillars. This marked the shortest and longest days with incredible accuracy, dictating the agricultural calendar for millions. They even used sacred mountain peaks as natural foresights, watching the sun's shadow creep along carefully carved stone channels to mark the passage of the seasons. This celestial engineering culminated in the Inti Raymi, the Festival of the Sun, held at the winter solstice in June. This was the most important event of the year, a time of great anxiety and then celebration. As the days grew shorter, people feared the sun god was abandoning them. The Sopa Inca would lead elaborate ceremonies, sacrifices, and prayers to plead with Inti to return. When the solstice arrived and the sun began its journey back north, it was seen as the god's answer, a promise of renewed life. The entire empire would erupt in days of feasting, music, and ritual, reaffirming the sacred bond between the sun, his son the emperor, and the people. For the Inca, worshipping the sky was how you fed a nation, governed an empire, and proved your family lineage was written in the stars. While the Inca saw the sun as a father, the ancient Greeks gave the sky a family, and a famously dysfunctional one at that. Their celestial mythology begins not with a benevolent ruler but with a tyrant. The very first sky god was Uranus, the personification of the heavens themselves. He was a primordial force, a vast dome of bronze that pressed down upon the earth goddess Gaia. But this was not a protective embrace. Uranus was a cruel and jealous ruler who hated his own children, the Titans, and imprisoned them deep within the earth. This oppressive rule set the stage for a cosmic revolution, a pattern of rebellion that would define Greek mythology. Gaia conspired with her youngest Titan son, Cronus, who ambushed his father and severed his connection to the earth, freeing the Titans and establishing a new, though equally flawed, order. This myth explained the very separation of sky from earth, a violent and necessary divorce that created the space for life to flourish. But the cycle of rebellion was not over. Cronus, fearing a prophecy that he too would be overthrown by his own child, swallowed each of his offspring at birth. His wife Rhea managed to save one, Zeus, hiding him away. This hidden son would grow up to challenge his father, force him to disgorge his divine siblings, and wage a great war against the Titans. Victorious, Zeus and his brothers drew lots for dominion over the universe. Zeus won the sky, becoming the ruler of Olympus, the master of thunder and lightning, and the enforcer of divine justice. In this evolution from Uranus to Zeus, we see the Greek mind at work, transforming the impersonal, crushing vault of heaven into a personality, a king with a temper and a complicated family tree, making the vast and frightening sky somehow more relatable, more human. They did not stop with the sky itself. Every major celestial body received a divine persona. The sun was not a disk of fire, but Helios, a magnificent god who drove a chariot of fire across the sky each day. The moon was Selene, a beautiful woman who rode her own silver chariot through the night. The dawn was Eos, the rosy-fingered goddess who opened the gates of heaven for her brother Helios. These were not distant symbols. They were characters with their own stories, loves, and tragedies, making the daily and nightly journey of the sun and moon a continuous divine drama playing out overhead for all to witness. But the Greeks' most enduring celestial gift is the one we still point to today, the constellations. For them, the starry night was not a random scattering of lights. It was a grand storybook, a memorial to heroes, monsters, and legends forever immortalized in the dark. The great hunter Orion, forever chasing the Pleiades sisters across the heavens. The vain queen Cassiopeia, bound to her throne as punishment. The mighty hero Heracles, the cunning Perseus, and the terrifying sea monster Cetus. Each cluster of stars was given a narrative, a way to remember and teach their myths. This practice of storytelling in the stars served a profound purpose. It transformed an overwhelming, chaotic expanse into a familiar landscape, a map of their own culture and values written in light. A shepherd watching his flock at night was not alone under an empty void. He was beneath the shield of Heracles in the presence of gods and heroes. By embedding their myths into the very fabric of the night, the Greeks achieved something remarkable. They made the cosmos their home, a place where every glittering point was a chapter in an epic that connected humanity directly to the divine. Their sky was not just to be worshipped or feared, but to be read, a celestial library where the stories never end. Yet the Greek sky, for all its drama, was a stable kingdom ruled by a permanent king. In the frozen north, the Norse envisioned a cosmos that was fundamentally fragile, a world living on borrowed time beneath a sky stalked by predators. Their entire universe was held together by a single, immense organism, Yggdrasil, the world tree. This great ash tree stood at the center of everything, its roots delving into 3 separate wells in the underworld, its trunk passing through Midgard, the realm of humans, and its branches stretching high into the heavens to form Asgard, the home of the gods. The sky itself was not a dome or a chariot path, but a canopy of living wood and leaf, one immense branch of this cosmic tree. And it was a tree under constant siege, nibbled by stags, serpents, and other creatures, a symbol of a universe perpetually fraying at the edges. Traveling along the branches of this celestial canopy were 2 luminous orbs, but they were not driven by glorious gods. The sun and moon were frantic charioteers forever fleeing. They were personified as the sister and brother, Sol and Mani, who raced across the sky in their chariots, not in a stately procession but in sheer terror. For close behind them, with jaws gaping, ran 2 monstrous wolves, Skal and Hati. Skal, whose name means treachery, chased the sun. Hati, he who hates, pursued the moon. Every day and every night was a desperate chase, and the occasional eclipse was a moment of heart-stopping dread, when it seemed one of the wolves had finally caught its prey. This was not a myth about order, but about entropy, a universe running down. This narrative of inevitable decay culminated in Ragnarök, the twilight of the gods. This was not a vague end times prophecy, but a specific foretold sequence. The stars would vanish from the sky. The earth would shake so violently that the bonds holding the great wolf Fenrir would shatter, and he would leap upward, his jaws stretching to fill the horizon, finally devouring the sun and plunging the world into an eternal winter. The sky itself would crack open, and fire giants would cross the rainbow bridge to wage the final battle. Yet even in this bleak cosmology, the Norse found breathtaking beauty in their night sky. The shimmering, ethereal curtains of the aurora borealis, the northern lights, were not seen as mere atmospheric phenomena. They were the Bifrost, the flaming rainbow bridge that connected the realm of gods to the realm of men, a pathway visible only in the deepest dark. More poetically, they were also believed to be the gleam of light reflecting off the shields and armor of the Valkyries, the warrior maidens who chose the slain from battlefields and carried them to Odin's hall, Valhalla. To stand on a frozen fjord under that swirling green and violet light was to witness the armor of divine choosers, a celestial spectacle that was both a promise of glory and a reminder of the impending glorious doom. For the Norse, the sky was a beautiful, terrifying, and temporary roof over a world always one step ahead of the wolf. The Norse sky was a frantic chase toward an inevitable end, but in ancient China, the heavens were a mirror of perfect moral order. Here, the sky was not a collection of capricious gods, but a single, supreme, and impersonal force called Tian, or heaven. Tian was the ultimate source of all legitimacy and virtue, a cosmic principle that governed the natural world and human society alike. Its most profound political expression was the Mandate of Heaven, a revolutionary idea that shaped Chinese civilization for millennia. This mandate stated that the right to rule was not a divine birthright, but a conditional grant from heaven itself, given to a dynasty only so long as its emperors ruled with benevolence, justice, and competence. The emperor held the sacred title Son of Heaven, acting as the sole intermediary between the celestial realm and the earthly one. His entire purpose was to maintain harmony between the two, ensuring that human actions aligned with the cosmic will. If he succeeded, the skies would be calm, the harvests bountiful, and the empire peaceful. But if he became corrupt, selfish, or ineffective, heaven would withdraw its mandate. This withdrawal was not announced in words, it was written across the sky in a language of terrifying omens. Unusual celestial events were not mere curiosities. They were direct celestial report cards on the emperor's performance. A comet with a long, sweeping tail was called a broom star, seen as heaven sweeping away a corrupt dynasty. A solar eclipse was a catastrophic sign, interpreted as the sun being eaten, a symbol of the emperor's fading light. Even unexpected planetary conjunctions or meteor showers were scrutinized as potential warnings. To read these celestial bulletins, the emperor relied on the Imperial Astronomical Bureau, a powerful ministry of scholar officials who were both scientists and diviners. Night after night, from observatory towers, they meticulously charted the movements of the sun, moon, planets, and stars. Their records, some of the most continuous and precise in the ancient world, were not just for making calendars. They were an early warning system for the state, a way to diagnose cosmic discontent. If the astronomers recorded a dire portent, it was a moment of supreme crisis. The emperor would often issue formal decrees of self-criticism, reduce his meals, and perform elaborate purification rituals to appease heaven and prove his worthiness to continue ruling. Within this framework of celestial order, the Chinese also wove beautiful, enduring myths to personify the heavenly bodies. The sun was driven across the sky each day by the mother goddess Zi in her six-dragon chariot, giving light and warmth to the world. The moon, however, held a more poignant story. The goddess Chang was said to live there, accompanied only by a jade rabbit. According to the most famous version of the myth, she attained immortality but at a terrible cost, drinking an elixir and floating away from her beloved husband, forever separated and lonely in her cold, luminous palace. This tale is still celebrated during the Mid-Autumn Festival, when families gather under the full moon, eating mooncakes and gazing upward at Chang's distant home. So in China, the sky was the ultimate moral authority, a clockwork of omens, and a canvas for timeless poetry, all watched over by an emperor who knew his right to rule could vanish as suddenly as a star falling from the night. If the Chinese sky was a moral report card, the Aztec sky was a battlefield, and the sun itself was a wounded warrior in need of constant nourishment. Their entire worldview was shaped by a terrifying and cyclical creation myth, the legend of the five suns. They believed the current world was not the first, but the fifth in a series of creations, each one ruled by a different sun and each one destroyed by a cataclysm. The first sun was devoured by jaguars, the second was swept away by a great wind, the third was destroyed by a rain of fire, and the fourth was drowned in a global flood. Each previous age had ended in apocalyptic failure. We now live in the age of the fifth sun, known as Nahui Olan, or Four Movement, named for the earthquake that will one day destroy it. This was not a distant theological idea. It was the foundational anxiety of their civilization, a belief that the cosmos was inherently unstable and that the sun's daily victory was never guaranteed. The sun god of this precarious age was Huitzilopochtli, a deity of war and the sun at its zenith, but he was not a triumphant ruler. Each night he descended into the underworld, weakened and dying. Each dawn he had to be reborn and fight his way back across the sky, battling the forces of darkness and his starry siblings, the Sentson Huitznahua. His weapon was the Zucotl, a fiery serpent, but his true fuel was something far more visceral. To win this daily cosmic war, Huitzilopochtli required tonally, the animating life force found in human blood and most powerfully in the still-beating human heart. Without this sacred sustenance, the sun would grow weak, lose its battle, and the fifth sun would end, plunging the world into permanent, chaotic darkness. This belief transformed sky worship from a matter of reverence into a matter of species survival. The Aztecs were not feeding a god out of cruelty, but out of a desperate, collective responsibility to keep the universe running. The most profound expression of this duty was the ritual performed atop the Templo Mayor, the great temple at the heart of Tenochtitlan. A captured warrior, often from a flowery war fought specifically to obtain sacrificial victims, would be led up the pyramid's steep steps. At the summit, under the blinding noon sun, 4 priests would hold him down over a sacrificial stone while a 5th priest with an obsidian blade would open his chest. The still beating heart, the container of tonally, would be ripped out and offered up to the sun. The body would then be rolled down the temple steps, a literal return of life energy to the earth. This act was seen as the highest form of reciprocity. The sun gave life through its light and warmth, and humanity repaid that debt with the ultimate gift of life force. The blood was called precious water, and the hearts were precious eagle cactus fruit, sacred nourishment for a starving deity. This cosmology made the Aztec state a vast spiritual machine dedicated to solar maintenance. Conquests provided captives for sacrifice. Tributes flowed into the capital to fund the temples and ceremonies. The entire calendar was structured around festivals dedicated to feeding the sun at critical junctures, like the solstices or during eclipses when the sun's struggle was most evident. To stand in the plaza of Tenochtitlan and watch the sun rise directly between the twin temples of Huitzilopochtli and Tlaloc, the rain god, was to witness a daily miracle bought with blood, a fragile pact between humanity and the heavens that held back the inevitable earthquake of the fifth sun's final day. From the Aztec world of a sun fueled by sacrifice, we journey to a civilization that saw the cosmos as a symphony of sacred law. In the ancient Vedic civilization of India, the sky was not a battlefield but a courtroom, a vast domain governed by an unshakable principle called Rita. This was the cosmic order, the fundamental rhythm that held the universe together, ensuring the sun rose, the seasons turned, and moral law prevailed. It was the duty of the celestial deities to uphold this order, and at the very foundation stood Dios Pitta, a name that echoes strangely familiar. Dios Pitta translates directly to Sky Father, a concept linguistically linked to the Greek Zeus Pater and the Roman Jupiter, pointing back to a shared, ancient Indo-European reverence for the heavens as a primal paternal force. But while Dios was the archetypal sky, another god held the gavel of cosmic law. This was Varuna, perhaps the most philosophically profound of the Vedic sky gods. Varuna was the sovereign of the celestial ocean, the boundless expanse beyond the sky that was the source of all waters and the home of the stars. He was the all-seeing judge, the binder of oaths, and the enforcer of Rita. With his 1,000 eyes, he witnessed every action, every truth, and every falsehood. To sin was to violate Rita, and such a transgression was not just a social error but a cosmic one, an act that could disrupt the very functioning of the world. People prayed to Varuna for forgiveness, not out of fear of punishment, but from a deep desire to realign themselves with the universal harmony he personified. Alongside these majestic overseers moved the brilliant, life-giving Surya, the sun god. He was not merely a celestial body, but the visible embodiment of divine truth and consciousness, driving across the sky in a chariot drawn by 7 horses, representing the 7 days of the week or the 7 colors of light. His daily journey was the most visible manifestation of Rita in action, a dependable, glorious affirmation of cosmic law. But the Vedic seers or rishis did more than compose hymns to these gods. They embedded astonishingly precise astronomical knowledge into their sacred texts, the Vedas. The Rig Veda describes the sun as the center of the universe around which all other bodies revolve. It speaks of a spherical earth and a cyclic, oscillating universe. The Yajurveda outlines a detailed altar construction ritual where the bricks were arranged to symbolically represent the number of days in the solar year, the lunar months, and even the intercalary days needed to synchronize them. This was sacred geometry as celestial science. They mapped the sky into 27 or 28 lunar mansions called the nakshatras, a zodiac used for timekeeping and ritual that is still foundational in Indian astrology today. They understood the cause of eclipses not as a monster devouring the sun, but as the shadow of one celestial body falling upon another. For the Vedic mind, to study the sky was to read the sacred blueprint of Rita itself, a pursuit that was both a scientific inquiry and the highest form of devotion, a way to witness the flawless order maintained by the watchful eyes of Varuna and the radiant chariot of Surya. The rigid order of Rita gives way to a wilder, more elemental sky. For the Celtic tribes spread across ancient Europe, the heavens were not a courtroom but a tempestuous domain of raw power, presided over by a god whose voice was thunder. This was Tyrones, whose very name means thunderer. He was the quintessential Celtic sky father, often depicted with a solar wheel in one hand and a thunderbolt in the other, a being who united the destructive force of the storm with the life-giving power of the sun. His symbol, the spoked wheel, was etched onto countless coins, weapons, and altars, a simple yet profound representation of the sun's cyclical journey across the sky and the turning of the seasons. To invoke Tyrones was to acknowledge the sky's dual nature, its capacity to nurture crops with sunlight one moment and shatter trees with lightning the next. But the sun had its own dedicated champion in the brilliant god Lugh, a master of all arts and crafts. His festival, Lugnasad, celebrated at the beginning of the harvest in early August, honored him as a solar deity who ensured the ripening of the grain, a time of games, feasting, and thanksgiving for the light that made the bounty possible. The most stunning window into this celestial worldview is the Gundestrup cauldron, a magnificent silver vessel found in a Danish bog. Its intricate panels are a riot of divine imagery, where gods and goddesses hold aloft spoked wheels, and a striking figure often identified as Tyrones himself immerses a man into the cauldron, possibly a symbol of rebirth under the celestial sphere. The entire artifact seems to tell a story of cosmic cycles, of life, death, and regeneration governed by the powers above. This deep connection to solar and celestial rhythms was woven into the very fabric of the Celtic year through their great fire festivals. Beltane, celebrated on May 1st, marked the bright half of the year, a time when bonfires were lit to mimic and encourage the sun's growing strength, purifying cattle and people as they passed between the flames. Its counterpart, Samhain, observed on November 1st, heralded the dark half, when the veil between the human world and the other world was believed to be at its thinnest. This was not just a festival for the dead, but a critical celestial turning point, a moment when the sun's waning power was acknowledged and the community prepared for the long, inward-looking winter. For the Celts, the sky was not an abstract concept. It was the wheel of Tyrannis turning, the skillful light of Lug ripening the fields, and the sacred fire on a hilltop that answered the stars, a direct and visceral dialogue with a heavens alive with potent, untamed spirit. The Celtic bonfires flickered in a world of spirits, but in the high deserts of ancient Persia, a new and revolutionary idea about the sky was taking flame. Here, the prophet Zoroaster introduced a cosmic vision of stark, absolute duality, a universe divided into an eternal battle between two primordial forces. On one side stood Ahura Mazda, the wise lord, the creator of all that was good, true, and orderly. He was not merely a sky god, he was the embodiment of the boundless, luminous sky itself, the source of Ashar, the divine law of truth and cosmic order that governed the path of the stars and the turning of the seasons. Opposing him was Angra Mainyu, the destructive spirit, the embodiment of falsehood, chaos, and darkness. The entire universe, including the sky above, was the arena for their struggle. This was not a myth of capricious gods, but a profound theology of moral choice, where every human thought, word, and deed was a vote for one side or the other in this grand celestial war. Within this framework, the sun held a position of supreme reverence. It was not just a celestial body, but the most potent physical manifestation of Ahura Mazda's creative light and his unwavering fight against the lie. The sun god Mithra, later worshipped widely as a deity of contracts and the rising sun, was a divine warrior, a guardian of truth and order whose chariot brought the dawn, scattering the deceptions of night. This reverence for celestial light found its most famous earthly expression in the sacred fire. Fire was not worshipped as a god itself, but as the purest symbol of the divine light of Ahura Mazda, a piece of the sun captured here on earth. These fires were not allowed to die. They were kept perpetually burning in special fire temples by a dedicated priesthood. The temples themselves, like the iconic Chahar-Tak structures, were architectural hymns to the sky. They were often built on elevated ground, with a central dome open to the heavens or designed with precise alignments. The dome represented the vault of the sky, and the sacred fire at its center was the axis mundi, the cosmic pillar connecting the earthly realm to the divine light above. Priests would use these open structures to observe the sun's movements, the stars, and particularly the planet Venus, known as Anahita, a goddess of the waters and the fertile sky. Their observations helped establish a sophisticated calendar crucial for agriculture in the arid landscape. To stand in a fire temple, watching the eternal flame reflect off a dark, star-domed ceiling, was to witness the very front line of the cosmic battle, a daily affirmation that light, truth, and order could be maintained against the encroaching darkness, one carefully tended flame at a time. While the Persians saw the sky as a cosmic battlefield, a people scattered across the world's greatest ocean saw it as a map. The Polynesians, voyagers across the vast Pacific, performed one of humanity's most breathtaking feats of exploration, not with compasses or sextants, but by reading a living, celestial map written in the language of the stars. Their entire civilization was a testament to the belief that the sky was not just to be worshipped, but to be sailed. At the heart of this relationship was the concept of mana, a sacred, impersonal power that flowed through the universe. The heavens were a primary source of this mana, and to navigate by them was to tap into a divine current, a spiritual collaboration with the cosmos. In Maori tradition, this was embodied in the primal parents, Rangi the Sky Father and Papa the Earth Mother, whose loving embrace created the world. The act of navigation was a reenactment of this cosmic story, a journey across the domain of Rangi himself. The navigator or wayfinder was not merely a sailor. He was a priest of the sky, a keeper of a sacred science passed down through generations in chants and stories. His classroom was the open ocean, and his textbooks were the stars, the winds, the clouds, and the flight patterns of birds. He memorized not just individual stars, but entire star paths, the specific sequence of stars that would rise and set over a particular island. each island had its own celestial address, a unique star compass. If you kept the rising point of a certain star directly off the bow of your canoe, you would, over days and nights, eventually make landfall at your target. But the sky offered more than just directional beacons. The wayfinder understood the colors of the sea, the shapes of clouds that gathered over unseen land, and the specific species of birds that would fly out to fish at dawn and return to land at dusk. A tern flying in a certain direction at sunset was as reliable a guide as Polaris. The swells of the ocean itself, the great rolling waves generated by distant weather systems, were felt through the hull of the canoe and read like lines on a map, constant directional guides even on starless nights. This knowledge was not practical information alone. It was a covenant. Before a long voyage, wayfinders would perform rituals to ask for clear skies and favorable winds from the ancestors and sky gods. The canoe itself was a microcosm of the universe, its sail catching the breath of the heavens. To be lost at sea was not just a physical danger, but a spiritual dislocation, a separation from the celestial pathways that connected them to their homeland and their gods. When they finally saw the faint green glow on the horizon or the cloud pile that signaled an island, it was the culmination of a sacred dialogue, a successful reading of the sky's divine manuscript. The Polynesians did not conquer the Pacific. They conversed with it using a language written in starlight and sung in the wind, proving that the greatest voyages begin not by looking at the waves but by looking up. The Polynesian wayfinders read a map of moving stars, but in Australia, the sky itself is a living library, its stories written in the constellations for over 60,000 years. For the Aboriginal peoples, the world's oldest continuous culture, the night sky is not a separate spiritual realm. It is the dream time made visible, a sacred dimension where ancestral beings created the land, the laws, and the stars in a single, ongoing act of creation. The constellations you see are not static pictures of animals or heroes. They are the actual forms of those creator ancestors, frozen in celestial moments of great drama, teaching eternal lessons. Take the great emu in the sky, a constellation known across many language groups. You will not find it by connecting bright stars. Instead, you must look at the dark spaces between the stars of the Milky Way. There, in the cosmic dust clouds, you see the silhouette of a giant emu, its head near the Southern Cross, its body stretching along the galaxy's length. Its position tells a profound story. When the emu appears low on the horizon at dusk, it is in a sitting posture, signaling the time when real emus are laying eggs, a cue for gathering. When it is high overhead, the emu is seen as running, indicating the season when the eggs have hatched and hunting can begin. This is not just astronomy. It is a direct, practical transmission of ecological knowledge from ancestor to descendant, written in negative space. Another powerful being is the great hunter Orion. In many Aboriginal traditions, he is not a warrior but a man named Nyaruna or a similar figure, perpetually chasing the seven sisters, the Pleiades, across the sky. But he is thwarted by their eldest sister, Kambagudha, the star cluster we call the Hyades, who stands protectively between them. This celestial story is a foundational law, a dramatic illustration in the heavens about the rules of kinship, marriage, and the protection of women. To look up is to receive a moral education. This sky library also served as a meticulous calendar. The careful observation of the heliacal rising of stars, just like the Egyptians watched Sirius, dictated the timing for everything. The appearance of the star cluster Matariki, or the Pleiades, at dawn might signal the start of the cool season or the arrival of a particular fish species. The movements of Venus and the Moon were woven into complex ritual cycles. Navigators used the sky not to cross oceans, but to traverse the vast, featureless outback, following star paths that pointed to waterholes and sacred sites created by those same ancestors in the dreamtime. Every songline, the intricate oral maps that describe journeys across the land, has its counterpart in the sky. To walk the earth is to trace a pattern written in the stars, and to navigate by the stars is to follow a story embedded in the land. This is a cosmology of perfect unity, where every law, every season, and every path is remembered in the eternal patterns above, a testament to a culture that has been reading the same celestial stories since the world began. The Australian sky is a library of stories written in dark dust, but on the vast rolling plains of North America, the sky was a great open prairie of its own, a domain where celestial buffalo roamed and stars held the keys to sacred power. For the plains tribes like the Lakota, Cheyenne, and Blackfoot, the sky was not a distant canopy. It was the source of all life, intimately connected to the earth through the very breath of the wind and the path of the sun. Their most profound act of communion with this life-giving force was the sun dance, a ceremony of sacrifice, prayer, and renewal that bound the entire community to the cosmos. This was not a casual festival. It was a solemn vow, a physical prayer offered in the heart of summer when the sun's power was at its peak. Dancers, having made a solemn pledge, would fast from food and water for days, their gaze fixed upon a sacred cottonwood tree at the center of the lodge. This tree was no ordinary pole. It was the axis mundi, the cosmic center, its trunk representing the connection between earth and sky, its leafy top touching the realm of the great spirit Wakantanka. The dancers moved to the drum's heartbeat, blowing on eagle bone whistles that mimicked the cry of the eagle, the sky's sacred messenger. Their suffering was an offering, a gift of their own flesh and spirit in exchange for the well-being of their people, for healing, for guidance, or in gratitude for a vision. Through this intense sacrifice, they sought to pull down the power of the sun, to channel its vitality into the community and ensure the continuation of life, the return of the buffalo herds, and the health of the coming generations. It was a direct, visceral dialogue with the sky as a living, responsive entity. Within this celestial realm, one star held particular awe for the warrior societies, the morning star. Known as Wikapi Wakan, or the sacred star, its brilliant, solitary appearance in the pre-dawn darkness was a symbol of purity, courage, and strategic clarity. To be called by the morning star in a dream was a powerful vision, marking a warrior for a life of leadership and sacred duty. Its light was seen as a cleansing force, burning away the confusion of night and illuminating the right path forward, much as a warrior's courage had to cut through the chaos of battle. This reverence is woven into one of the most beautiful and profound celestial myths, the Lakota story of the white buffalo calf woman. In a time of great need, two scouts encountered a beautiful woman dressed in white buckskin, appearing from the direction of the rising morning star. She carried a sacred bundle. One scout recognized her divine nature, but the other entertained impure thoughts. A cloud descended, and when it lifted, the disrespectful man was a pile of bones, while the respectful one was instructed to prepare the people. The woman, Tesson Y, presented the people with the sacred pipe, demonstrating how to use it in prayer to connect the earth to the sky. She taught them 7 sacred ceremonies, including the sun dance, and as she departed, she rolled upon the earth, transforming first into a black buffalo, then a brown, a red, and finally, a white buffalo calf before vanishing over the horizon. She promised to return one day, and her coming from the stars forever linked celestial origin with the most sacred gifts of law, spirituality, and survival. For the plains peoples, every puff of sacred smoke from the pipe, every beat of the sun dance drum, was a thread connecting the heart of the community to the buffalo in the sky and the star from which wisdom first walked the earth. But the sun that rises over the islands of Japan is born from a story of divine retreat. The foundational myth of Shinto, the indigenous spirituality of Japan, centers on a moment when the light of the world almost vanished forever. Amaterasu Omikami, the radiant sun goddess, was so deeply offended by the violent and unruly behavior of her brother, the storm god Susanoo, that she sealed herself inside the Ama no Iwato, the heavenly rock cave. With her withdrawal, the world was plunged into utter darkness, chaos reigned, crops failed, and malevolent spirits ran wild. This was not merely a celestial event. It was the collapse of cosmic order itself. The 8 million kami, or spirits, gathered in desperation to lure her out. They placed a sacred mirror, the Yota no Kagami, on a tree outside the cave, and the goddess Aim no Uzum performed a wild, ecstatic dance upon an upturned tub. Her stomping and raucous laughter were so infectious that the other kami roared with delight. Curious about the commotion outside her self-imposed prison, Amaterasu cracked the cave door open. Her own dazzling reflection, captured in the mirror, shone back at her. Mesmerized by this brilliant light she did not recognize as herself, she leaned out for a closer look. At that moment, a strong god pulled the cave door fully open, and light was restored to the world. This myth is far more than a simple story. It establishes Amaterasu not just as a celestial body, but as the source of all harmony, fertility, and life. Her retreat signifies the fragility of cosmic balance, and her return is a victory of joy, cleverness, and communal effort over discord. This divine ancestry forms the very bedrock of Japanese imperial tradition. The emperors of Japan were historically regarded as direct descendants of Amaterasu, her living representatives on Earth. This sacred lineage granted them not just political authority, but a priestly duty to maintain the connection between the heavenly realm of the kami and the human world. The 3 sacred regalia of the imperial throne forever commemorate the cave story. The mirror, the Yota no Kagami, symbolizes the sun itself and the wisdom that lured the goddess back. It represents truth, for just as a mirror reflects without distortion, the ruler must govern with clarity and honesty. The sacred sword and the jewel complete the set, but the mirror is paramount. Enshrined at the Grand Shrine of Eyes, the most sacred Shinto site, it is the physical embodiment of the sun goddess's spirit. Rituals for the sun permeated ancient Japanese life. The most important was, and remains, the act of greeting the dawn. Pilgrims would climb sacred mountains like Mount Fuji to witness the Goreiko, the honorable coming of the light, a moment of pure worship. At Eyes, priests still perform nightly rituals to bid the sun farewell and morning ceremonies to welcome it back, ensuring its daily return is never taken for granted. Every act of purification at a shrine, every offering made, echoes that primordial moment when the world worked together to coax the sun from her cave, a daily reminder that light, order, and life itself are gifts that must be continually honored and sustained. Across the dense forests and wide rivers of ancient Slavic lands, the sky was not a gentle dome but a realm of terrifying power and sudden violence. Here, the supreme deity was not a distant sun or a starry ancestor, but the crack of lightning and the roar of thunder made manifest. This was Perun, the god of the sky, storms, war, and justice. His voice was the thunderclap that shook the earth, his weapon the lightning bolt that split ancient oaks, trees considered sacred to him. He was the ultimate defender of cosmic order, a celestial warrior king who ruled from the heights, and his worship was rooted in raw, awe-inspiring force. People would seek protection under his symbol, a 6-spoked wheel or an axe, carved into the lintels of their homes to ward off the evil spirits they believed were cast down by his strikes. Yet Perun did not rule alone. His power was defined by his eternal adversary, Veles, the god of the earth, the underworld, cattle, wealth, and magic. This was the fundamental Slavic duality, Perun of the high, dry, celestial order versus Veles of the low, wet, chthonic chaos. Their mythic battles were not just stories, they were explanations for the very rhythms of life. When a summer storm erupted, with lightning flashing from the sky and rain soaking the ground, it was seen as Perun pursuing Veles, who would hide by transforming into animals or slithering into the roots of trees and the depths of waterways. The lightning strike was Perun's bolt hurled at his foe, the thunder his furious shout. The rain that followed was the fruitful, if chaotic, result of this clash, bringing Veles's waters from below to nourish Perun's sky-fed crops. This eternal struggle mirrored the cycle of the seasons: Perun's dominance in the bright, stormy summer and Veal's ascendancy in the dark, dormant winter. Alongside this thunderous drama, the sun held its own sacred place, though often in a more domestic, life-giving aspect. The sun was sometimes personified as Dajbog, the giving god, a divine ancestor of the Slavic peoples who rode his chariot across the sky. His daily journey was celebrated through potent solar symbols, the most widespread being the kolovrat, a swastika-like emblem with arms bent in a cyclical motion. This was not a symbol of hate, but an ancient, universal sign of the sun's eternal turning, of life, fortune, and the cyclical nature of the cosmos. You would find it etched on pottery, woven into clothing, and carved on wooden architecture, a constant invocation of celestial blessing and perpetual motion. Even the Milky Way had its place in this cosmic narrative. It was known as the Path of the Birds or the Road of the Spirits, the celestial highway along which migratory birds traveled and human souls journeyed after death, a bridge between Perun's sky realm and the world below. For the Slavs, every rumble in the clouds was a divine argument, every sunrise a turn of the sacred wheel, and the vast sky above was a living, breathing, and often furious participant in the fate of the world below. While Perun's thunder echoed over the Slavic forests, the people along the eastern shores of the Mediterranean lived under a different kind of sky father, one whose authority was absolute yet strangely distant. The ancient Canaanites and their seafaring descendants, the Phoenicians, worshipped a pantheon where the heavens were ruled by a venerable patriarch named El. He was the creator god, the father of both gods and humanity, often depicted as a wise, aged king with a long, white beard, seated upon his throne at the source of the cosmic rivers, the meeting place of the upper and lower oceans. His name simply meant God, and his authority was supreme but passive, like the vast, calm, blue sky on a still day. El was the ultimate source of order, but he did not often intervene directly in the tumultuous affairs of the world. That fiery, active role belonged to his sons, the younger, more volatile gods who battled for dominion over the forces that shaped daily life. And among these, none was more important than the rising star of the pantheon, Baal-Hadad. Baal was not a sun god. He was the god of the storm, the bringer of rain, and by extension, the master of fertility. In a land where life depended entirely on the autumn and spring rains, Baal was the most immediate and vital celestial power. His voice was the thunder, his weapon the lightning bolt, and his gift was the life-giving downpour that turned the parched hills green. But to earn that gift for humanity, Baal had to wage a perpetual cosmic war. His primary enemy was Yam, the god of the chaotic sea and the primordial waters of chaos. In a dramatic myth recorded on clay tablets at the city of Ugarit, Yam sends arrogant demands to the divine assembly, claiming kingship over the gods. The aged El seems to acquiesce, but Baal, champion of order, refuses. With two magical clubs forged by the craftsman god, Baal confronts the monstrous Yam. After a fierce battle, he strikes down the sea god and establishes his own kingship, proving that the storm rising from the sky can subdue the chaotic waters and make the coast safe for habitation. Yet this victory is only the first act in a cyclical drama. Baal's other great enemy is Mot, the god of death, sterility, and the drought of summer. In a pivotal story, Mot, who dwells in the underworld, challenges and ultimately defeats Baal, swallowing the storm god and bringing a devastating 7-year drought upon the world. The goddess Anat, Baal's fierce sister and consort, mourns him violently, then descends to the underworld. She confronts Mot, seizes him, and with a ritualistic fervor she winnows him, burns him, grinds him, and scatters his remains over the fields. This brutal act of vengeance and sowing leads to Baal's resurrection and the return of the rains. This entire cycle, the myth of Baal's death and rebirth, was not just a theological story. It was the celestial explanation for the seasons. Baal's battles with Yam represented the winter storms that churned the sea. His reign in spring brought the nourishing rains. His defeat by Mot was the harsh, rainless summer. His resurrection by Anat heralded the autumn storms and the return of the agricultural cycle. Every clap of thunder was Baal asserting his power, every dry season a reminder of his temporary defeat. The Phoenicians, carrying this cosmology across the Mediterranean, built temples to Baal on high places like the famed Tophet of Carthage, seeking to commune with the sky god who controlled their fate at sea and on land. For them, the sky was not a single entity, but a dynastic drama where a young storm god's violent struggles against sea and death were the only things standing between their civilization and chaos. The Hittites built an empire not just on conquest but on a calculated fusion of heavens. Emerging in the rugged highlands of Anatolia, they were voracious borrowers of culture, especially when it came to understanding the sky. Their own supreme deity was Tahana, a mighty storm god who wielded the thunderbolt, a figure of raw Anatolian power reminiscent of the Slavic Perun. Yet when they expanded southward and came into contact with the sophisticated celestial traditions of Mesopotamia, they did not discard their gods. Instead, they performed a theological merger, deliberately syncretizing Tahana with the great Mesopotamian storm god Adad, and later even with the Babylonian Marduk. This was a political and spiritual strategy, an attempt to harness the perceived authority of older, venerable cosmic orders and weave them into their own. The sky for the Hittites became a diplomatic arena. They adopted the Mesopotamian practice of celestial divination with intense seriousness, maintaining a large guild of court astrologers and diviners. Any unusual event in the heavens, a solar eclipse, a comet, an unusual planetary conjunction, was immediately reported to the king. These were not mere curiosities. They were state secrets, urgent bulletins from the gods that could dictate military campaigns, delay coronations, or demand elaborate rituals of atonement. The Hittite king was not just a warlord, he was the chief priest, personally responsible for maintaining the correct relationship with the stormy sky. Alongside the thunderous Tahana stood a powerful, life-giving counterbalance, the sun goddess of Arina. She was one of the most important deities in the Hittite pantheon, a maternal, sovereign figure often called the Queen of all lands. While many cultures saw the sun as masculine, the Hittites revered this great solar goddess as a source of justice, protection, and regal authority. Her daily journey across the sky was a guarantee of cosmic law and order. This celestial duality, the fierce, ordering storm and the benevolent, judging sun, was literally set in stone at the rock sanctuary of Yazilikaya, where processions of gods led by the storm god and the sun goddess are carved into the open air, a permanent celestial court frozen in limestone. This profound reverence for the sky as witness and guarantor reached its peak in international diplomacy. When the Hittite Empire signed its most famous treaty with Egypt, the Treaty of Kadesh, it was not sealed merely by the signatures of Pharaoh Ramesses II and King Hattusili III. The concluding oath invoked the gods of both nations as divine enforcers. Specifically, they called upon the deities of the sun and the storm, the 1,000 gods of the Hatti land and the 1,000 gods of the land of Egypt, were summoned, with the sun goddess of Arina and the storm god Tahana standing prominently among them. To break such an oath sworn by the celestial powers was to invite cosmic retribution, ensuring that the treaty was anchored not just in earthly politics, but in the very fabric of the watched heavens. For the Hittites, ruling meant continuously interpreting and appeasing a borrowed sky, a patchwork of divine powers where Anatolian thunder met Mesopotamian omens under the unwavering eye of a solar queen. The Hittite treaties were sworn before a council of celestial powers, but on the island of Crete, a civilization flourished that seemed to worship the sky through a language of pure, breathtaking symbol. The Minoans of ancient Crete, Europe's first advanced civilization, left behind no deciphered texts, no king lists, no clear pantheon. Their entire cosmology is a magnificent, silent riddle told through the art that adorns their palaces. And everywhere you look, from fresco to seal to sacred object, you see the same powerful motifs repeating, a visual code that many believe points directly to the heavens. The most dominant of these symbols is the labrys, the double-headed axe. It is carved into stone pillars, stamped on clay tablets, and held aloft by priestesses in stunning frescoes. But what did it mean? One compelling theory suggests it is not a weapon of war, but a symbol of transformation. Its shape closely resembles a butterfly, a creature the Minoans depicted with reverence. The butterfly's life cycle, from caterpillar to chrysalis to winged adult, was a perfect metaphor for the soul's journey, perhaps even for the cyclical rebirth of the sun or the moon. Yet another interpretation links it to the sky's most dramatic power, the lightning bolt. A double-headed axe splitting the air mirrors the forked path of a lightning strike, a celestial weapon wielded by a storm god. The labrys might then be a symbol of divine power cleaving the sky, a tool that could split open the heavens to release life-giving rain or sacred energy. This object was so central that the grandest palace complex at Knossos is designed around a central courtyard flanked by what are called the pillar crypts, dark, subterranean chambers where rows of these double axes were stood upright, perhaps to channel that very power from the world below to the world above. Then there is the bull. The Minoan obsession with this powerful animal is legendary, culminating in the famous ritual of bull leaping, depicted in art where acrobats gracefully vault over a charging bull. This was likely not a sport, but a profound religious ceremony. Could the bull itself be a celestial symbol? The constellation Taurus, the bull, was one of the most prominent and ancient star groups known. The bull's sacrifice in ritual could have been an act of sympathetic magic, an offering to the celestial bull to ensure the sun's strength as it passed through that constellation in the spring, a time of renewal and planting. The act of leaping over the bull might have symbolized a human crossing from the earthly realm into the celestial one, a daring dance with a divine, starry power. Towering over this symbolic landscape are the serene, powerful figures of Minoan goddesses, often depicted holding writhing snakes in both hands with arms outstretched. These figures radiate an aura of divine authority. The snakes, creatures of the earth that shed their skin and are reborn, likely symbolize chthonic power, fertility, and the underworld cycle. But the goddess's posture is one of revelation, her arms raised not to the earth but toward the sky. In many depictions, she stands beneath a canopy of stylized rosettes or abstract patterns that could very well represent the starry night. She becomes the intermediary, the mistress of both the serpentine powers below and the celestial order above, uniting the cosmos in her person. A stunning gold pendant from the island of Malia shows just such a goddess, her elaborate dress covered in bees, holding bees in her hands, standing between two bees. The bee, a creature that navigates by the sun and creates perfect geometric hives, could itself be a solar symbol. This artifact may depict a honeymoon goddess, a deity of the sweet, nourishing light of the heavens. Without written words, the Minoans composed their theology in fresco and gold, where every bull's charge might echo a constellation's path, every double axe could capture a lightning flash, and every goddess stands as the living axis between the dark earth and the brilliant, star-filled sky. This silent language of symbols gives way to a voice thundering from the desert, a voice that would reshape humanity's relationship with the sky forever. For the ancient Hebrews, the heavens presented a profound theological challenge, a tension between the visible power of celestial bodies and the invisible authority of a single, all-powerful creator. Their sacred texts reveal a remarkable evolution, a journey from a world filled with divine beings in the sky to a universe commanded by one God alone. In the earliest layers of the Hebrew Bible, we find traces of a more ancient polytheistic worldview. The phrase host of heaven appears frequently, and it does not merely mean stars. It refers to the divine assembly, the pantheon of lesser gods and spiritual beings who populated the celestial realm. Yahweh, the God of Israel, is depicted as the supreme king presiding over this heavenly council. He asks the prophet Micaiah, who will entice Ahab into battle, and a spirit from this host volunteers. In the book of Job, the sons of God present themselves before Yahweh. This was a cosmic monarchy, not yet an absolute monarchy, but a radical shift was underway. The defining struggle of early Hebrew religion was to reject the worship of these celestial powers, which were so venerated by every neighboring culture. The sun, the moon, and the stars were not gods, they were creations. The book of Deuteronomy issues a stark, unambiguous command. And when you look up to the sky and see the sun, the moon, and the stars, all the heavenly array, do not be enticed into bowing down to them and worshipping things the Lord your God has apportioned to all the nations under heaven. This was a revolutionary idea. The very objects other civilizations saw as divine were demoted to mere lamps, set in the firmament by a God who existed beyond and before them. The creation story in Genesis makes this hierarchy explicit. God creates the two great lights on the fourth day, to govern the day and the night, and to serve as signs for seasons and days and years. They are functionaries in a cosmos brought into being by divine command. Yet, even as they were stripped of divinity, the sun, moon, and stars were not stripped of meaning. They became the ultimate signs of Yahweh's covenant and his awesome power. The Psalms are filled with this celestial poetry. The heavens declare the glory of God, the skies proclaim the work of his hands. The celestial bodies are mute witnesses to their Creator's majesty, a silent choir singing his praise simply by following the paths he ordained for them. A solar eclipse or an unusual celestial event was not an omen from a capricious sky god, but a potential sign from Yahweh, a demonstration of his control over all creation. The prophet Isaiah taunts the Babylonians, whose power was built on celestial divination, saying God will cut off Babylon's stargazers, those who make predictions by the new moons. For the Hebrews, true knowledge came not from reading the stars, but from obeying the God who made them. This theological revolution reached its zenith in the story of Joshua, where the sun itself is commanded to stand still at Gibeon. The narrative does not describe Joshua praying to the sun god. Instead, he speaks to Yahweh, and Yahweh halts the sun's journey across the sky as a sign of his favor for Israel. The celestial body obeys the Creator, not the other way around. This established a new cosmic order, a transcendent God who uses his creation as a canvas for his will, a God so powerful that even the greatest lights in the sky are but tools in his hand, pointing not to themselves, but to the one who spoke them into existence. The Hebrew vision of a creator beyond the stars sailed westward with their Phoenician cousins, whose colonies dotted the Mediterranean coast. At the greatest of these colonies, Carthage, sky worship took a form so stark it still chills the modern mind. Here, the chief deity was Baal-Hamon, a lord of the sky, the sun, and crucially, fertility. He was not the stormy Baal-Hadad of old Ugarit, but a more solemn, sovereign figure, often depicted as an elderly man enthroned, sometimes with a solar disk above his head. His consort was the goddess Tanit, whose symbol a stylized triangle representing a robe or a figure with upraised arms, topped by a disk and crescent-dominated Carthaginian art. This symbol, the sign of Tanit, is believed to represent the unity of the celestial powers, the sun disk of Baal-Hamon and the crescent moon, all held within the embrace of the goddess. Together, they govern the cycles of the heavens and the fruitfulness of the earth, but the Carthaginians believed this celestial favor could not be earned through prayer alone. It had to be purchased with the most precious currency imaginable, the life of a child. This belief manifested in the Tophet, a sacred, walled precinct separate from the city's main temples. Archaeologists have unearthed these sites to find rows upon rows of small, stone urns, each containing the cremated remains of infants and young animals, buried beneath stone markers carved with the sign of Tanit and dedications to Baal-Hamon. The inscriptions are heartbreakingly formal, To the Lady Tanit, face of Baal, and to the Lord Baal Hammon, that which was vowed by followed by the name of the donor. The donors were not tyrants or a distant priestly class. They were often wealthy, prominent citizens, even leading generals and magistrates. This was not a practice of the desperate poor, but a supreme sacrifice offered by the elite to secure the ultimate blessings from the sky gods. Why the prevailing interpretation is one of extreme reciprocity in a perilous world. Carthage was a mercantile empire, its survival dependent on successful sea voyages, bountiful harvests, and victory in constant wars with Greek rivals and, later, Rome. Baal Hammon, as a sky and solar god, controlled the weather for sailing, the sun for crops, and the favorable omens for battle. In the face of a great crisis, a severe drought, a military defeat, a plague, the logic of the sacrifice was terrifyingly clear. To renew the sacred covenant with the powers of the sky, to literally replenish the life force of the city and its gods, the Carthaginians offered what was most vital: their own future, their firstborn sons. It was known as a Malk sacrifice, a term related to the word for king or rule, suggesting it was an act of ultimate sovereignty, giving back to the divine ruler what he had first given. The animals buried alongside the children, often lambs or kids, may have been symbolic substitutes, but the human remains are undeniable. To stand at the Carthaginian Tophet was to witness the dark shadow of sky worship, where the need for celestial favor became so absolute that it demanded a price written not in gold or grain, but in the silent ashes of innocence, a stark reminder that the heavens could be imagined not only as a source of life, but as a hungry mouth that required the most profound payment. While Carthage looked to the sky with sacrificial dread, their future conquerors, the Romans, inherited a far more systematic celestial science from a mysterious people who lived among them. The Etruscans, whose sophisticated civilization flourished in central Italy long before Rome was more than a village, believed the sky was not a place of gods but a vast divine parchment. Every flash, every flutter, every movement in the heavens was a direct sentence written by the gods, a message about fate that could be read by those who knew the language. They were not merely sky worshippers, they were the ancient world's most meticulous celestial cryptographers, and their entire religious practice was built on one principle: divination, the art of interpreting the divine will. This practice had a name, the Disciplina Etrusca, a sacred corpus of knowledge so precise it was considered a science. At its heart was the belief that the gods communicated through signs in the sky, and that human prosperity depended entirely on correctly reading and responding to those signs. The most dramatic of these celestial messages was the lightning bolt. The Etruscans did not just fear lightning, they studied it with a taxonomist's eye. This practice was called fulguria. They believed different gods controlled lightning from different parts of the sky, and the meaning of a strike changed dramatically based on a complex set of variables. A priest known as a fulgurator would note everything. Which quadrant of the sky did the bolt originate from? That told him which god had sent it: Tinia, the supreme sky god; Uni, his consort, or a lesser deity. What direction did it travel? Did it fork left or right? Did it strike and rebound, or bury itself in the earth? Was it a bright, clean flash or a dim, smoky one? Each detail altered the interpretation. A bolt from the northeast might be a favorable sign from a benevolent god, while one from the northwest, the sinister quarter, was almost always an omen of disaster. They even recorded what object was struck: a temple, a tree, a public statue, as this indicated where the god's attention, whether wrathful or approving, was focused. After a significant strike, the fulgurator would often excavate the impact site, retrieve a buried, vitrified stone called a fulgur, and treat it as a sacred relic, a literal piece of divine speech that had touched the earth. But the gods spoke in more subtle tongues than just thunderbolts. They also spoke through birds. Augury, the interpretation of bird flight patterns and behavior, was another cornerstone of the Disciplina Etrusca. A specially trained priest, the augur, would mark out a sacred space called a templum on the ground, which was a mirror of a corresponding sector in the sky. He would then sit, often on a high place, and observe. Did the birds fly from left to right or right to left? That was the fundamental question, as left and right were coded with positive and negative meanings. What species of bird was it? An eagle, the bird of Tinya, carried the most weight. How many were there? What was their formation? Did they sing or remain silent? Every element was a syllable in an avian sentence from the gods. This was not random guesswork. It was a rigid, formalized system of observation designed to remove human bias. The augur did not ask, "Will I win the battle?" He would ask the gods to send a sign regarding a proposed course of action, and then he would take the auspices, reading the bird's movements as a simple yes or no answer from the divine realm. To manage this flood of celestial data, the Etruscans performed a breathtaking act of intellectual organization. They divided the dome of the sky into 16 precise sectors, like slices of a celestial pie. Each sector was the designated domain of a specific god or group of gods. This map of the heavens was not symbolic, it was a practical guide for divination. When a lightning bolt flashed or a flock of birds crossed from one sector into another, a priest could immediately identify which god was speaking to which other god, and what their conversation might mean for human affairs. This entire system, the sectoring of the sky, the rules of augury, the interpretation of lightning, was the Etruscans' greatest export to their neighbors. The Romans, initially a rough hill people, were utterly fascinated by this sophisticated celestial science. They adopted the disciplina Etrusca wholesale, training their own priests in its methods. No Roman general would think of leading an army into battle. No consul would convene a Senate meeting without first consulting the augurs to see if the heavens were favorable. The very foundation of Rome was said to have been guided by augury, when Romulus and Remus watched for birds to see who would rule. In this way, the Etruscan art of reading the sky became the operating system for the Roman Republic and later the Empire, turning the unpredictable fury of nature into a manageable code of divine law, one lightning bolt and one bird's flight at a time. The Etruscans read the sky as a complex text, but for the Scythians, the vast steppe sky was not a page to be decoded, it was the only roof they had ever known. These fierce nomadic horsemen, whose empire of grass stretched from the Black Sea to the borders of China, lived a life of radical exposure. Their world was defined by the endless horizon, a boundless dome of blue by day and a black velvet cloak of stars by night. In such a landscape, the sky was not a distant deity. It was an intimate, overwhelming presence, the ultimate sovereign of their mobile existence. Their primary deity, curiously, was not a thunderous sky father, but a goddess named Tabiti. She was the guardian of the hearth, the sacred fire that was the beating heart of every Scythian family and the one fixed point in their wandering lives. Yet this was no ordinary domestic spirit. For a people who carried their homes on wagons, the hearth fire was far more than a tool for cooking. It was a piece of the sun captured on earth, a fragment of celestial power that provided warmth, warded off the predatory darkness of the steppe, and purified all that it touched. Tabiti, as the mistress of this perpetual flame, was thus intrinsically linked to the sun's life-giving and ordering power. She represented the sacred center in a world without walls, the celestial order that made the nomadic life possible amidst the chaos of the open plain. To honor her was to acknowledge that even under the infinite sky, a family, a tribe, a people could carry their own sacred center with them, a mobile star guiding their travels. But alongside this veneration of the hearth sun, the Scythians performed a ritual of stunning simplicity and raw power that spoke directly to the sky itself. Every year, in a grand gathering of the tribes, they would plant a sacred, ancient iron sword upright into a high mound of brushwood. This was not a weapon readied for battle. It was an offering, a bridge, The sword, the very symbol of their martial sovereignty and survival, was driven into the earth, its blade pointing like a lightning rod toward the heavens. Around this implanted sword, they would sacrifice cattle and horses, pouring the blood of these most prized animals over the blade and letting it soak into the earth below. The act was profoundly symbolic. The earth received the blood, the sustenance of life, but the sword, the conduit, delivered the essence of that sacrifice upward. It was a direct transaction with the sky god, often identified with the Greek Zeus or the Iranian Ahura Mazda in later accounts, a plea or a payment for favor, for victory, for the continued freedom of the open sky. This ritual perfectly encapsulated the Scythian cosmos. They stood between earth and sky, nomads rooted only by ritual, offering the fruits of the earth through the symbol of their own strength to the boundless authority above. Their entire identity was forged in that space between the soil trampled by hooves and the infinite blue, a people forever offering their swords to the heavens in exchange for the right to ride free beneath them. South of Egypt, where the Nile carves a path through golden deserts, a rival power rose to command the sun. The kingdom of Kush, in what is now Sudan, was not merely an echo of its northern neighbor. It was a formidable empire that forged its own blazing covenant with the heavens, producing pharaohs who claimed the sun's lineage with even greater fervor. While they adopted many Egyptian gods, their celestial devotion centered on a uniquely Kushite deity, Apedemak. This was no gentle solar disk. Apedemak was a lion-headed god of war and the sun, a fusion of raw, predatory power and scorching celestial authority. His image, carved on temple walls, shows a muscular man with the fierce head of a lion, often holding captives or weapons, with a sun disk and royal cobra crowning his head. He was the sun as conqueror, the light that vanquishes darkness through sheer, overwhelming force. This reflected the Kushite reality as a military powerhouse that would one day rule Egypt itself as the 25th dynasty. To worship Apedemak was to invoke a divine mandate for empire, to ask the sun for victory on the battlefield as well as fertility in the fields. This solar warlord cult found its ultimate expression in the great temple complex at Musawwar at Safra. Unlike the linear, processional temples of Egypt, Musawwar is a sprawling labyrinth of courtyards, ramps, and chambers, almost like a celestial fortress. Its central feature is the Great Enclosure, a vast structure whose purpose remains partly mysterious, but whose walls are covered in reliefs of Apedemak and processions of elephants, animals sacred to the god. Here, the Kushite kings performed rituals to harness the sun god's power, likely in ceremonies that combined royal coronation, military triumph, and divine communion. The architecture itself seems designed to capture and magnify the sun's presence, with alignments that would have flooded specific chambers with light at solstice dawn, turning stone into a vessel for Apedemak's spirit. This was a sun temple built not for passive observation, but for the active channeling of celestial might into the person of the king, and the Kushite kings embodied this claim absolutely. They styled themselves as the direct sons of the sun, a title they wielded with profound political symbolism. When the Kushite king Pi invaded a fractured Egypt in the 8th century before the Common Era, he did so not as a foreign barbarian, but as a pious sun king restoring cosmic order to a land he claimed had lost its way. His famous victory stela presents his conquest as a religious duty to the god Amun-Ra, the solar deity he shared with the Egyptians, but it was a duty filtered through his Kushite identity as Apedemak's champion. The Kushite pharaohs of the 25th dynasty, like Taharqa, built pyramids steeper and more pointed than the Egyptian ones, their sharp silhouettes against the desert sky like stone rays of the sun, emphasizing their unique, piercing connection to the celestial source of power. In Kush, the sun was not just a life-giver watched from a riverbank. It was the fierce father of a line of warrior kings, a lion in the sky whose children built temples to his glory and carried his conquering light north to the very throne of the pharaohs. Deep in the swampy lowlands of what is now Mexico, a civilization emerged from the jungle that would become the blueprint for all Mesoamerican cultures to follow. The Olmecs, often called America's first civilization, did not just live under the sky. They began the meticulous work of decoding it, laying down a celestial foundation that the Maya, the Zapotec, and the Aztecs would later build upon. Their world was a dense green realm where the boundary between the earthly and the supernatural was as thin as the morning mist, and the sky was a dominant character in that story. Their art is dominated by a haunting, recurring figure, the word jaguar. This is not a simple animal. It is a hybrid being, part human infant, part powerful jaguar, with a distinct cleft head, snarling mouth, and downturned eyes. For decades, this enigmatic image has puzzled archaeologists. One compelling theory connects it directly to the Olmec's experience of the sky. The jaguar was the undisputed lord of the night in the Mesoamerican jungle, a creature of immense power and stealth. Could the word jaguar represent a celestial jaguar, a dark sun that traveled through the underworld at night? This idea of a night sun, a solar force that battles darkness in the realm below, is a core belief found in later Mesoamerican cultures. Perhaps the Olmecs were the first to envision it. Even more strikingly, some scholars see in the word jaguar's distinctive features a depiction of an eclipse. The downturned, almond-shaped eyes could mirror the crescent sun during a partial eclipse, while the cleft head might symbolize the sun being split or bitten by the dark moon. If true, this means the Olmecs were not just observing eclipses with fear, but were ritualizing them, giving that terrifying celestial event a permanent, sculpted form to be worshipped and appeased. This artistic motif was their first attempt to capture and control the drama of the heavens, but the Olmecs moved beyond art into precise, systematic observation. They were among the world's earliest inventors of a formal calendar, a necessity for organizing their complex society and agricultural cycles. While the details are fragmentary, evidence points to their use of a 260-day ritual calendar, a sacred count of days that would later become the Tzolk'in of the Maya. This was not a calendar for planting corn. It was a divine almanac, a way to track the movements of the sky gods and determine auspicious days for ceremonies, for births, for rulership. They likely also tracked the solar year using simple but effective methods. At the site of La Venta, one of their great ceremonial centers, archaeologists have found curious offerings buried in precise, cross-shaped patterns aligned to the cardinal directions. This careful orientation to north, south, east, and west is a fundamental act of celestial engineering, a way to anchor their sacred space to the immutable order of the cosmos. It suggests they were already mapping the sun's path along the horizon, marking its extreme northern and southern turning points at the solstices. This knowledge of solar cycles gave them predictive power over seasons and rains, the first step in a long tradition of Mesoamerican astronomical mastery. Their most iconic creations, the colossal stone heads, stand as silent, brooding sentinels. Carved from immense basalt boulders transported from distant mountains, these helmeted portraits of rulers weigh many tons. Their sheer physical presence is overwhelming, but their placement may hold a celestial secret. While their exact original positions are debated, some researchers propose that the heads were not arranged randomly. At the site of San Lorenzo, the heads seem to be positioned in a way that could have created observational sightlines. A priest or ruler standing at a specific point might have been able to use the head's imposing silhouette to mark the rising or setting of a key star or the sun on a significant day. They may have been more than monuments to power. They could have been the first giant astronomical instruments in the Americas, stone witnesses to the dawn of a new age, their stony gaze forever fixed on the horizon where Earth met sky. In the humid Olmec heartland, the act of watching the heavens began as a sacred science, a dialogue between colossal stone and moving light that would echo for 1,000 years. The jungle's colossal stone heads gave way to the stark, sun-baked coast of Peru, where another civilization listened to a different celestial rhythm entirely. For the Moch, who flourished between the 1st and 8th centuries along that narrow desert strip, the sun was a constant, brutal presence, but the true ruler of their world was not the blazing day star. It was the moon. In an environment where rain almost never fell, life depended on the thin rivers cutting down from the Andes and, crucially, on the rich marine resources of the Pacific. The moon, with its undeniable power over the ocean's tides, became the supreme celestial force. It governed the coming and going of the fish, the rise and fall of the coastal fog that provided minimal moisture, and the very cycles of growth and decay. This was a cosmology born of necessity. The sun parched the land, but the moon moved the sea that fed them. Their moon god was not a gentle silver orb. He was Ea Peak the Decapitator, a deity of terrifying duality. In stunning Moch pottery and elaborate temple friezes, he appears as a fierce, fanged being, often with the claws of a bird and the tail of a serpent. Most strikingly, he is almost always crowned with a towering, crescent-shaped headdress, a direct emblem of his lunar dominion. Ea Peak was a creator and a destroyer, a god who brought the life-giving waters but also demanded blood in return. He was the force behind the fertility of the ocean and the valleys, yet also the source of storms, floods, and drought if not properly appeased. This appeasement took a form as dramatic as the god himself. The Moch are famous for their elaborate ritual combats, ceremonies that were far more than symbolic games. High-status warriors, clad in fine regalia, would engage in ceremonial battles before a large audience. The loser, not the winner, was the central figure. He was not simply killed. He was taken in a solemn procession to a high temple platform, where priests would offer him a ritual cup of fermented beverage. Then, in an act meant to ensure cosmic renewal, his throat was cut. The blood was collected in ceremonial cups and offered to the priests and the ruling elite, while the body was systematically dismembered. Finally, the head was severed, often with a crescent-bladed Toomey knife, a tool mirroring the moon's shape. This severed head was a potent offering to Ea Peak, the Decapitator. The logic was a brutal form of celestial reciprocity. Just as the moon waned and was reborn, so too must life be given to sustain the cycle. The sacrifice returned the life force, the Kamaquan, to the celestial realm, pleading with Ea Peak to maintain the order of the tides, the fog, and the fertility of the land and sea. This entire sacred drama was meticulously timed by the stars. At the great adobe pyramid known as Huaca de la Luna, archaeologists have found alignments suggesting the Moch tracked the moon's movements with precision. Certain ceremonies likely reached their climax under specific lunar phases, perhaps when the moon was full or new, its power at a peak. The sacrifice was the culminating act in a dialogue with the night sky, a desperate and beautiful attempt to bargain with the cold, silvery god who held the keys to survival in a world of sand and sea. 5,000 years ago, on a rolling green hill in Ireland, a community gathered massive stones to build a message for the future. Newgrange is not a fortress or a home. It is a passage tomb, a mound covering an acre of earth, surrounded by a curb of white quartz stones that gleam like captured moonlight. Its entrance is guarded by a single, immense carved stone covered in spirals, circles, and diamond shapes, a language of symbols we can no longer read. But the building itself speaks a clear, celestial sentence. A long, narrow passage lined with slabs weighing tons leads deep into the heart of the mound. At its end lies a cross-shaped chamber, a sacred space where the cremated bones of the ancestors were placed. For most of the year, this inner sanctum is a place of profound, silent darkness, a womb of earth and stone. But for a few precious minutes around the winter solstice, something miraculous happens. Just after dawn, as the sun crests the horizon on the shortest day of the year, a slender beam of golden light pierces a special opening above the tomb's entrance, a feature called the roof box. This shaft of sunlight travels down the 60-foot passageway, growing broader until it floods the central chamber with a radiant, moving pool of light. illuminating the intricate carvings on the back wall. For approximately 17 minutes, the darkness is utterly banished. Then, as the sun continues its climb, the light retreats and the chamber returns to shadow for another year. This was no accident of architecture. The alignment is too precise. The roof box was engineered to capture only the sun's rays at the solstice and for a few days on either side of it. This means the builders 5 millennia ago possessed an intimate, sophisticated knowledge of the solar cycle. They could predict the sun's most southerly rising point with stunning accuracy, using only naked eye observation and a deep cultural memory passed down through generations. They were not just marking a date on a calendar, they were staging a cosmic drama. In the deepest dark of winter, when the world seemed to be dying, they built a machine of stone to prove the sun would return. The light penetrating that long passage was a divine rebirth, a symbolic fertilization of the Earth's dark womb. It connected the world of the living outside in the cold dawn with the world of the ancestors resting inside the mound. In that glowing moment, the cycle of life, death, and renewal was made visible. The sun was not just a god to these Neolithic Irish, it was a promise kept annually in a temple of earth, witnessed by the bones of the dead and the spirals carved in stone, a silent Stone Age hymn to the certainty of light. The promise of light held in stone at Newgrange stands in stark contrast to a mystery written not in rock, but in oral tradition in the remote cliffs of Moray. The Dogon people have preserved a cosmology that has ignited one of the most heated debates in modern anthropology, centered on a star we cannot see. For centuries, the Dogon have recounted the story of the Nommo, amphibious, fish-like beings who descended from the sky in a great arc that spun on its axis as it landed, bringing the principles of civilization to humanity. These celestial teachers, they say, came from the star system of Sirius, the brightest star in our night sky. But the Dogon description of this system contains a staggering detail. They speak of a tiny, incredibly dense and heavy companion star to the brilliant Sirius A. They call it Po Tolo, Po meaning the smallest seed, a grain known as Digitaria, and Tolo meaning star. This seed star, they say, orbits Sirius in an elliptical path over a period of 50 years and is made of a metal heavier than all the iron on Earth. This is a precise and eerily accurate description of Sirius B, a white dwarf star. The problem is, Sirius B is completely invisible to the naked eye. Its existence was only inferred by Western astronomers in the 1840s due to gravitational wobbles in Sirius A, and it wasn't visually observed through a telescope until 1862. So how could a people without written records or optical instruments know about it? The traditional explanation, supported by many anthropologists, is one of cultural transmission. The Dogon have had contact with the outside world for centuries. French missionaries and colonial administrators were present in the region by the late 19th century, and Sirius B was a major topic of popular astronomy books and magazines in Europe by the early 20th century. It is plausible, critics argue, that this modern astronomical knowledge was absorbed into the rich tapestry of Dogon myth, becoming retrofitted to their existing stories of the Nommo. They point out that the most detailed accounts of this knowledge came from a few Dogon elders after extensive interviews with French anthropologist Marcel Graillou in the 1930s and 40s, suggesting a possible, if unintentional, leading of witnesses. Yet the Dogon themselves and some researchers counter that the knowledge is far older, embedded in their rituals, their sand drawings, and their sacred masks for generations. They describe the orbit with a specific number, 50 years, which is close to the modern calculation of 50.1 years. Their emphasis on the star's incredible density and weight mirrors the known properties of a white dwarf, a stellar corpse so dense a teaspoonful would weigh tons. The grain they compare it to, Digitaria, is a tiny, hard seed, a perfect metaphor for a small, compact object. The debate forces us to confront the nature of ancient knowledge. Is it possible that an advanced prehistoric culture developed sophisticated astronomical observation over millennia, passing it down through an unbroken oral tradition? Or is the doggone serious mystery a powerful example of how ancient myth and modern science can become beautifully and confusingly intertwined? Whether the knowledge is genuinely ancient or a remarkable synthesis, the doggone story holds a profound truth about our species. It reflects a universal human impulse to look at the brightest point in the night sky and imagine it holds a secret, a companion, a story of visitors from a world beyond our own. The Nomo, whether memory or metaphor, remind us that the sky has always been a place from which wisdom is imagined to descend. This celestial diplomacy reached its most famous expression in a treaty signed with Egypt, a document that survives on clay and silver. After decades of brutal warfare, the Hittite king Hattusili III and the Egyptian pharaoh Ramesses II sought not just peace but a cosmic guarantee of it. The treaty they crafted was extraordinary. It did not merely list terms of trade or borders. It was a sacred oath sworn before a divine assembly, a celestial court of law. The text explicitly invokes the 1,000 gods of the Hatti land and the 1,000 gods of the land of Egypt as witnesses. But among this vast heavenly host, two deities were given special prominence as the ultimate guarantors, the sun goddess of Arina and the storm god Tarhana. Why these two? They represented the fundamental pillars of Hittite cosmic order. The sun goddess, with her all-seeing light, was the incorruptible witness. Nothing could be hidden from her gaze. She would see any act of treachery, any broken promise, no matter how cleverly concealed. The storm god, with his thunderbolt, was the divine enforcer. He was the power that would deliver punishment, striking down the oath breaker with drought, plague, or military defeat. To swear an oath before them was to place your nation's fate directly into the hands of the sky itself. This was not poetic language, it was binding celestial law. The treaty was inscribed on a silver tablet, a material associated with the moon's cool gleam, perhaps to reflect the impartiality of the celestial witnesses. Copies were placed in the temples of the major gods in both empires, physically placing the agreement under divine protection. The logic was impeccable and terrifying. A human king might be tempted to break a treaty for short-term gain, but no sane ruler would risk provoking the direct wrath of the sun and the storm. The sky gods became the ultimate international arbiters, their imagined anger a more potent deterrent than any human army. This practice transformed diplomacy from a political negotiation into a religious covenant. Every clause, every promise was now woven into the fabric of cosmic order, maintained by the watchful eye of the sun and the poised lightning bolt of the storm. For the Hittites, a stable world depended on convincing both their enemies and their allies that the heavens were not just watching, but were actively invested in the honesty of human words. The Hittites anchored treaties to the sun and storm, but the Maya found cosmic law in the very motion of a ball. For them, the ball game was not a sport. It was a sacred reenactment of celestial creation, played out in a stone court that mirrored the heavens themselves. The ball court was not a simple playing field. It was a liminal space, a portal between worlds. Its long, narrow alley, flanked by steep, sloping walls, was seen as a crack in the universe, a representation of the Milky Way splitting the night sky or the dark road into Xibalba, the underworld. The two end zones were not just goals, they were celestial markers, often aligned on a north-south axis, anchoring the game to the fundamental directions of the cosmos. To step onto the court was to enter a mythic arena where the fate of the sun and the very cycle of day and night hung in the balance, and at the center of this drama was the ball itself. Crafted from solid rubber, a material sacred to the Maya, it was heavy, unpredictable, and capable of astonishing, lightning-fast rebounds. This was no ordinary sphere. It was a celestial body in motion. Most scholars believe the ball represented the sun in its perilous nightly journey through the underworld. Its bounce echoed the sun's movement, its flight through the air an arc of light against the dark stone. In some interpretations, it could also be a star or even the decapitated head of a god, a grisly trophy from the mythic past. The players, adorned with heavy protective padding of leather and wood, became the deities of the story. Their goal was not simply to score points. They had to keep the ball in perpetual motion, using only their hips, thighs, and elbows, never their hands or feet. This was a ritual of continuity. Letting the ball stop was a symbolic catastrophe, akin to the sun halting its journey and leaving the world in eternal night. The sound of the heavy rubber striking against stone and padding created a deep, resonant thunder, the very voice of the sky god speaking through the game. This entire spectacle was a physical prayer, a reenactment of the most important story in the Maya cosmos, the Popol Vuh. In that epic, the hero twins, Hunahpu and Xbalanque, were summoned to the underworld by its arrogant lords to play the ball game. The lords believed they would easily defeat and sacrifice the twins, just as they had the twins' father and uncle, but the twins were clever and resilient. They survived the deadly houses of darkness, bats, and blades. On the ball court, they allowed themselves to be defeated and sacrificed. Yet, through miraculous magic, they resurrected themselves, ultimately outwitting the lords of Xibalba and defeating them. Their final act of vengeance was not mere destruction. They did not abolish the underworld. Instead, they subdued its lords, restricting their power and transforming them into the gods of disease and misfortune. Having conquered death, the twins then ascended from the depths of the underworld, rising into the sky. There, they were transformed into eternal celestial bodies. Hunahpu became the sun, his brilliant light vanquishing the darkness he had endured. Xbalanque became the full moon, a softer, watchful companion in the night. Their father, the first father who had been decapitated by the lords of Xibalba, was resurrected as the maize god, ensuring the cycle of agricultural life. Every time the Maya played the ball game, they were not just remembering this myth, they were performing it. The players embodied the hero twins. The opposing team represented the lords of Xibalba. The hard-fought struggle on the court mirrored the cosmic battle. The final outcome, though often predetermined, symbolized the inevitable victory of life and order over chaos and death, the daily victory of the sun over the night. The ball, soaring from end to end, traced the path of resurrection. And sometimes, for the ultimate validation of this sacred cycle, the game did not end with a score. It ended with a sacrifice. Captives of war, often kings from rival city-states, were sometimes forced to play a rigged, ritual version of the game. Their defeat on the court was a cosmic judgment. Afterward, they would be taken to a nearby temple platform and decapitated, their heads perhaps even used as a ball. This gruesome conclusion was the final, literal act of the myth. The captive became the lord of Xibalba, defeated and sacrificed, his life force offered to nourish the sun and ensure its triumphant return. The ball court, therefore, was more than an arena. It was a machine for making time move forward, a stone engine that used human sweat, rubber, and sometimes blood to reenact the celestial drama that guaranteed the dawn. To witness a game was to watch the sun and moon be reborn before your eyes, to hear in the thunder of the ball the very heartbeat of a sky that demanded to be played into existence. The Coricancha was more than a temple of gold. It was the navel of the universe, the fixed point from which the Inca wove their entire empire into a single, breathing, celestial organism. This was achieved through the sex system, a breathtakingly complex web of invisible lines that radiated outward from the sun temple like threads of sacred energy. Imagine 41 straight pathways called sex fanning out from Cusco across the rugged Andes, dividing the landscape into precise ritual sectors. These were not roads for travel. They were sightlines of power, spiritual highways that connected the Coricancha to over 350 huacas or sacred shrines. A huaka could be anything that held spiritual power: a spring, a cave, an oddly shaped rock, an ancient tomb, or a mountain peak that touched the sky. Each one was a node in this vast living network, a point where the divine force of the cosmos intersected with the earth. The sects organized these scattered points of power into a coherent hierarchical order, transforming the chaotic Andean landscape into a meticulously ordered sacred map. But this map was not static. It was a clock, a calendar written across mountains and valleys. The Inca priests understood that the sun, moon, and stars did not rise and set in the same place every day. Their rising points crept along the horizon throughout the year. They used the sect system to track these movements with astonishing precision. A specific huaca, perhaps a distant notch between two peaks or a prominent boulder on a hillside, would be designated as the marker for a crucial celestial event. When the sun rose directly behind that particular shrine, it signaled a solstice, an equinox, or the beginning of an important agricultural season. The entire sect system functioned as a giant, open-air observatory, with the Coricancha at its center as the observing platform. Priests would stand at the temple, looking out along a designated sect line, and watch for the moment the sun aligned with a far-off huaca. This told them it was time to plant potatoes, to hold the festival of the sun, or to make offerings for rain. The calendar was not marked on parchment, but on the horizon itself, a perpetual celestial drama performed for those who knew how to watch. This system did more than tell time. It organized the very social and economic life of the empire. The maintenance of the shrines along each sect line was assigned to specific clans or islas in a rotating schedule of duties. A family's responsibility to clean a certain spring, make offerings at a particular cave, or repair a path was not just civic duty. It was their sacred obligation to keep the cosmic energy flowing along the lines, to maintain the harmony between the sky and the empire. The sect structured labor, worship, and community identity into one seamless whole. Every offering of coca leaves, every sacrificed guinea pig at a humble wayside shrine was an act of cosmic maintenance, a reaffirmation of the bond between the people and the celestial order mapped out from the Coricancha. In this way, the Inca did not just build an empire on the land. They projected an empire onto the sky and then mapped that sky back onto the earth. A farmer tending his terraces was not just growing food. He was living and working within a specific sector of a divine plan, his labor synchronized with the movement of stars he could not name but whose timing dictated his survival. The sect system was the ultimate expression of Inca genius, a fusion of astronomy, theology, and statecraft so complete that to walk the land was to traverse a star chart, and to follow a ritual line was to walk a path laid down by the sun itself. This cosmic law of Rita demanded more than hymns and observation. It required a supreme, earthly act to bind the heavens to the throne. The most spectacular of these was the Ashvamedha, the horse sacrifice, a ritual of staggering scale and ambition designed to forge a direct link between a king's dominion and the sky itself. The ceremony began not with blood but with release. A flawless, consecrated stallion, often pure white, was selected by the royal priests. After a year of elaborate preparatory rites, the horse was set free to wander at will for an entire year, accompanied by a retinue of the king's most elite warriors. This was no peaceful pilgrimage. The wandering horse was a living, breathing claim of sovereignty. As it roamed across plains, through forests, and along river valleys, any territory it entered was considered claimed for the king who had released it. Local chieftains faced a stark choice. They could offer tribute and submission to the accompanying warriors, acknowledging the horse's passage as an extension of the king's authority, or they could challenge the escort and fight. The horse's year-long journey was thus a map of conquest drawn in hoofprints, a slow, deliberate expansion of empire sanctioned by divine ritual. All the while, the horse was treated as a living god protected from harm, its every movement watched as an omen. When the year was complete, the warriors guided the horse, and by extension, the vast new territories it had symbolically absorbed, back to the royal capital. A monumental festival ground was prepared, with 3 sacred fires and a complex array of ritual posts. The horse was then ceremonially sacrificed, not to a warrior god, but to Prajapati, the lord of creatures and the personification of the creative, expansive power of the sky itself. The ritual was incredibly intricate, lasting for days, involving the participation of hundreds of priests and the king's entire family. The sacrifice was the climax of a cosmic transaction. The horse, having gathered the essence of the land, became a vessel containing the entire kingdom. By offering it to Prajapati, the king was offering his realm back to the celestial source from which all authority flowed. In return, he sought a renewed mandate, a fresh infusion of divine power that would confirm his sovereignty, ensure the fertility of his now expanded lands, and rejuvenate the cosmic order of Rita itself. The Ashvamedha was the ultimate statement of imperial theology. It declared that true kingship was not taken by force alone, but was a gift from the sky, earned through the most extravagant act of sacred reciprocity imaginable. The wandering horse was the king's ambition made flesh, and its sacrifice was the price the heavens demanded to make that ambition part of the eternal, turning wheel of the universe. But the Greeks' genius for the sky was not confined to poetry and myth. It was forged in bronze and turned with gears. In the year 1900, sponge divers off the coast of the Greek island of Antikythera stumbled upon a Roman-era shipwreck, a treasure trove of statues, coins, and jewelry. Among the corroded artifacts was a lump of greenish, calcified bronze about the size of a shoebox. It seemed unremarkable, a piece of nautical junk. But decades later, when it was X-rayed, the scientific world was left speechless. Inside that lump was a complex assembly of at least 30 interlocking bronze gears, precisely cut with triangular teeth, housed within a wooden frame that bore inscriptions and scales. They had found the Antikythera mechanism. This was not a navigational tool or a simple clock. It was an ancient Greek computer, a mechanical model of the cosmos, designed to predict the movements of the heavens with astonishing accuracy. Dated to around the 2nd century before the Common Era, it represents a technological leap so profound that nothing of comparable complexity would appear again for over 1,000 years. The device was a portable universe. By turning a hand crank on the side, an operator could advance a series of dials on both the front and back. On the front, pointers showed the positions of the Sun, the Moon, and likely the 5 known planets Mercury, Venus, Mars, Jupiter, and Saturn against the backdrop of the Greek zodiac. This alone was a mechanical marvel, simulating the irregular, looping paths of the planets, a problem that would not be solved again until Johannes Kepler in the 17th century. But the Greeks had solved it with gears, using a brilliant system of epicyclic gearing to mimic the observed retrograde motion. On the back, 2 large spiral dials served as celestial calendars. One predicted the timing of solar and lunar eclipses, not just for the current year, but for cycles of years into the future. It even indicated the characteristics of each eclipse, whether it would be solar or lunar, and the time of day it would occur. The second major dial was a complete surprise. It was a 4-year calendar that tracked the cycle of the Panhellenic Games, including the Olympic Games. This connected the cosmic clockwork directly to the sacred rhythm of Greek society, tying the celestial cycles to the most important cultural and religious events. The inscriptions on the plates were a user manual, explaining which constellations would rise and set on specific dates, and detailing the motions of the planets. The purpose of this device remains a subject of debate. Was it a teaching tool for philosophers, a rich man's dazzling toy, a navigational aid for sailors? The most compelling theory is that it was used for astrological calculation and calendar regulation, a tool for priests, scholars, or even rulers to plan events, interpret omens, and demonstrate mastery over the perceived order of the cosmos. Its very existence shatters our image of the ancient world. It proves that the Greek pursuit of celestial understanding went far beyond stargazing and storytelling. They built machines to think with, to model reality, to bring the infinite complexity of the sky down to human scale, where it could be held, cranked, and understood. The Antikythera mechanism is a silent witness to a lost pinnacle of engineering, a bronze testament to the idea that to worship the sky was not just to marvel at it, but to decode its mathematics and replicate its motion with human hands. Yet the vast ocean demanded more than individual skill. It required a sacred headquarters, a place where the knowledge of the sky was not just used but consecrated. On the island of Rhaetia, in what is now French Polynesia, lies a mare unlike any other. Tapu Tapu Rhaetia is not merely a temple of stone platforms and upright slabs. It is the navel of the Polynesian sky, the spiritual axis from which the entire Pacific was woven into a single, navigable world. The name itself means sacred sacrifices from afar, and for centuries this was the Vatican, the Greenwich, and the Cape Canaveral of the Polynesian universe. Here the highest priests, known as Taha, gathered not to worship a distant god in the abstract, but to study the living blueprint of creation laid out in the stars above. They were the master astronomers of the ocean, calibrating their sacred knowledge against the horizon of a known fixed point. The mare's central altar, the Ahu, was precisely aligned. Its stone face points directly toward the rising point of the star Matariki, the Pleiades at the time of its heliacal rising, a critical marker for the new year and the season of abundance. Another alignment captures the setting of the star Vega. These were not random observations, they were celestial anchors hardwired into the architecture of the temple, turning Tapu Tapu Rhaetia into a permanent stone observatory that verified the star calendars recited in chants. This sacred site was the launchpad for history. From this spiritual core, the great voyaging canoes were ritually prepared and consecrated for their journeys into the unknown. Before departure, navigators and crews would undergo intense purification and participate in ceremonies on the mare. They would receive the final blessings of the priests, who would interpret the omens and confirm the celestial pathways were favorable. It was from Rhaetia, according to many oral traditions, that the great waves of migration fanned out to settle the most distant corners of the Polynesian Triangle, to Hawaii, to Rapa Nui, Easter Island, and to Aotearoa, New Zealand. Each of these epic voyages was not a desperate flight, but a deliberate expansion, a carrying of the sacred sky from the center to the periphery. The navigators setting out from Tapu Tapu Rhaetia carried with them more than just wayfinding knowledge. They carried the spiritual authority of the center, the mana of the place where the sky met the ocean floor. The chants they memorized were not simple rhymes. They were nautical algorithms, sacred compositions that encoded star paths, currents, and island sequences in a form that could be perfectly remembered and passed down across generations. A chant for sailing to Hawaii, for example, would list the succession of stars to follow, the number of nights to sail under each, and the signs of landfall. To recite the chant was to mentally sail the route, to walk the sky road before a single paddle touched the water. Tapu Tapu Rhaetia was the library where these chants were refined and safeguarded, the living database of the Pacific. Even today, the immense silence of the mare, with the wind sighing through the coconut palms and the surf crashing on the distant reef, feels charged with the echoes of those departures, the moment when a piece of the sacred center cast itself upon the stars, trusting that the same sky that arched over the temple of stone would guide them to a new home. That silhouette in the dark dust is a living calendar. While many cultures connected stars into pictures of animals, Aboriginal Australians saw the animal itself in the spaces between the stars. The emu in the sky is not a constellation of bright points. It is a vast cosmic negative space, a majestic shape formed by the dark nebulae, the lanes of interstellar dust, that streak across the brilliant band of the Milky Way. Its head is near the Southern Cross, a dark patch known as the Coalsack Nebula. From there, its long neck and bulky body stretch down the length of the galaxy, a shadowy profile against the starry river. To see it, you must stop looking at the lights and start seeing the dark. This act of perception is the first lesson. The sky is not just a scattering of luminous objects. It is a full tapestry where both light and shadow hold meaning, where absence can be more significant than presence. The story this dark emu tells is not a frozen myth. It is a dynamic, instructional narrative that changes with the seasons, directly tied to the behavior of its earthly counterpart. In the evening sky of early autumn, around March or April, the emu in the sky appears low on the horizon in a distinctive posture. It is seen as sitting, its body parallel to the earth. This celestial posture is a direct signal. On the ground, this is the time when real female emus are sitting on their nests, incubating their clutches of large, dark green eggs. The sky emu's position tells people that the eggs are being laid and are now protected. It is not yet time to gather, but as the weeks pass, the earth turns. The celestial emu begins to rise higher in the night sky. Its orientation shifts. By late autumn, the emu in the Milky Way is no longer sitting. It is standing upright, its legs clearly defined as if it is running. This is the critical change. On the ground, the eggs have now hatched. The male emu, who takes sole responsibility for the chicks, is leading them away from the nest, teaching them to forage. The mother is gone, the period of protection is over, and the season of gathering begins. The appearance of the running emu in the heavens is the all-clear signal. It tells the people that the eggs left behind in the nests, those that were not viable, are now available to be collected. These eggs are a rich source of food, and their thick shells become valuable water carriers or canvases for intricate carvings. This is not mythology for its own sake. It is a precise, ecological bulletin written in galactic dust. The sky emu's transformation from sitting to running provides a fail-safe, universally visible indicator that synchronizes human activity with the animal's life cycle, ensuring sustainable harvesting. It is a perfect example of a living sky law, where the cosmos is a practical guidebook, its chapters turning slowly overhead, reminding everyone that the law of the land is written in the dark spaces between the stars. From the celestial pharaohs of Egypt to the star-chasing navigators of Polynesia, from the lightning readers of Etruria to the dark emu watchers of Australia, we have journeyed across 35 distinct worlds. Each civilization crafted its own unique dialogue with the heavens, yet every single one was answering the same profound human call. The sky was not just a spectacle. It was humanity's first shared project. Before written language, before the wheel, we looked up and saw a story that needed to be told. We built our first clock from the sun's journey, our first calendar from the moon's phases, and our first scripture from the patterns of the stars. In that vast, silent dome, we found the rhythms for our harvests, the authority for our kings, and the maps for our soul's ultimate journeys. The incredible diversity of their beliefs, from the sun-eating wolves of the Norse to the moral omens of the Chinese mandate of heaven, reveals the boundless creativity of the human spirit when faced with the infinite. But beneath that diversity lies a universal chord of awe, a collective acknowledgement that our lives are part of something staggeringly grand. This ancient wonder is our common inheritance. It connects the shepherd on a Mesopotamian ziggurat to the Inca priest on a mountaintop, the Maya ball player in a stone court to the Aboriginal elder singing a songline under the Milky Way. They all asked the same questions we still ask today about our place in the cosmos, and they found their answers written in light. So tonight, or the next clear night you have, step outside. Look up. You are not just seeing points of light in a dark void. You are gazing at humanity's oldest library, our first cathedral, our original compass. See the constellations not just as pictures, but as the myths of Greece, the law of the dreamtime, the omens of Babylon. Feel the weight of that shared gaze across millennia. And as you stand there under that ancient storytelling sky, we would love to know, Which civilization's cosmic view resonated with you the most? Was it the Polynesians, for whom the sky was a sailable sea? The Dogon, with their mysterious knowledge of a hidden star? The builders of Newgrange, who captured the winter sun in a tomb of stone? Share your thoughts in the comments below. The conversation about the sky, after all, is one humanity has never stopped having.